Disclaimer: the story is a work of creative fiction inspired by the title provided. Any resemblance to real people, schools, or events is purely coincidental. The purpose of this story is to highlight the emotional bond that can form between a teacher and student and how true education often goes beyond textbooks. It is written in English for a USA audience with the intent to entertain, inspire, and evoke reflection. The classroom smelled faintly of chalk and freshly polished floors when she first walked in. Miss Anderson, a young teacher in her late 20s, had just been assigned her new group of students. She adjusted her glasses nervously, carrying a stack of neatly prepared lesson plans. Teaching English was her passion, but more than that, she believed in teaching with heart. The morning light filtered through the wide classroom windows, casting a warm glow on the wooden desks lined up in neat rows. She inhaled deeply, ready to begin. As she called out names during roll call, one boy caught her attention. He sat in the back, shoulders hunched, eyes lowered, as if wishing to disappear. His name was Daniel. When she asked him a simple question in English, "Can you introduce yourself?" his lips moved, but no words came out. His classmates chuckled softly, and his cheeks flushed crimson. Miss Anderson didn't scold him, nor did she move on quickly. Instead, she gave him a small, reassuring smile and said gently, "It's okay, Daniel. We'll take it one step at a time. I'm here to help you." That small gesture planted the first seed of trust. Throughout that first week, Miss Anderson noticed Daniel's struggle wasn't just with vocabulary or grammar. He avoided speaking at all, even outside of class. He kept to himself, eating lunch alone, his notebooks filled with half-finished assignments. But something about him stirred her heart. His silence wasn't laziness, it was fear. She had seen students like him before, those who carried invisible burdens too heavy for their age. On Friday, when the bell rang and the class rushed out, Daniel lingered behind, stuffing his books slowly into his bag. Miss Anderson took the chance to approach him. "You did well today," she said softly. He looked up, surprised, as if he hadn't heard those words in a long time. "But I couldn't even answer your question," he whispered. She knelt slightly so their eyes met and replied, "Learning isn't about perfection, Daniel. It's about progress. And today you tried, that matters." For the first time, a flicker of hope appeared in his eyes. He gave her a small nod before hurrying out the door. Miss Anderson watched him leave, realizing that this student needed more than just English lessons. He needed patience, encouragement, and someone to believe in him. And in that quiet classroom, she made a silent promise. She would not only teach Daniel how to speak English, but also how to find his voice. The following weeks unfolded like the slow turning of pages in a cherished book. Every day, Miss Anderson brought not just a textbook into class, but a new way of looking at learning. She had learned long ago that students didn't fall in love with English by memorizing grammar charts or copying endless lists of vocabulary. They learned when lessons came alive, when words carried meaning. So, instead of starting each morning with drills, she began with stories. "Today," she announced one Monday, "we're going to tell each other about our favorite memories." The students groaned at first, afraid of making mistakes, but Miss Anderson didn't correct every slip of grammar. She let them speak, stumble, and laugh through their sentences. She clapped for every attempt. Daniel, however, stayed quiet, staring at the floor. When his turn came, his voice trembled as he said, My favorite memory is playing football with my father." His accent was heavy, the pauses long, but Miss Anderson's smile was brighter than the morning sun. "That's wonderful, Daniel. You see? You can do it." For the first time, the class clapped for him instead of laughing. He lowered his head to hide a smile that threatened to break through. Miss Anderson began weaving lessons that touched both language and life. One day, she brought in a box of objects, a photograph, a seashell, a small pocket watch, and asked students to describe them in English. When Daniel picked up the watch, he hesitated, then whispered, "Time is fast." His answer wasn't just grammatically correct, it carried depth. Miss Anderson felt a tug in her heart. She knew this boy had thoughts and feelings trapped behind a wall of insecurity, and English was just the key to unlock them. Outside of grammar exercises, she began teaching her students about courage, resilience, and kindness. She often reminded them, English is not just words, it's confidence. It's how you stand up for yourself, how you share your ideas, how you connect with the world. Daniel listened more intently than anyone else, as if those words were meant for him alone. One afternoon, as the class worked on a group project, Miss Anderson noticed Daniel sitting on the sidelines. His group had dismissed his ideas because he couldn't explain them clearly. Miss Anderson walked over, sat down, and asked Daniel to share again, this time with her help. Together, they shaped his thoughts into sentences. See, she told his group. Daniel has brilliant ideas, you just needed to listen. The other students looked at him differently after that. For the first time, Daniel felt his voice had value. Every small success became a stepping stone. He began volunteering to read aloud in class, sometimes stumbling, sometimes getting it right, but always trying. And each time, Miss Anderson's encouragement made his eyes shine a little brighter. She wasn't just teaching him grammar rules, she was teaching him that mistakes weren't failures, that his thoughts mattered, and that his voice, however shaky, deserved to be heard. In those weeks, the classroom changed. English lessons became life lessons, and Daniel began to see himself not as the boy who couldn't speak, but as someone learning how to express his heart. As the weeks turned into months, Daniel's English slowly improved. He began speaking in short sentences, daring to raise his hand in class, and even smiling occasionally when Miss Anderson praised him. Yet, beneath these small victories, she sensed something deeper, something that grammar lessons alone could not fix. His eyes often carried a weight beyond his years, and at times, his silence spoke louder than his words. One rainy afternoon, Miss Anderson stayed late after school to grade papers. She noticed Daniel lingering outside the classroom window, his shirt damp from the drizzle. Daniel, she called, motioning him inside. He hesitated before stepping in, clutching a torn backpack. When she asked why he hadn't gone home, he muttered, I don't like being there. The words were quiet, almost swallowed by the sound of the rain against the glass. Curious but gentle, she asked, why not? His answer came slowly, piece by piece. His parents fought constantly, and the house was filled with shouting more than laughter. His father worked long hours and came home angry, while his mother seemed too tired to care. Daniel often spent evenings in his room, headphones on, trying to drown out the noise. At school, I feel better, he admitted, his eyes fixed on the floor. Miss Anderson's heart ached. She realized the boy's struggle with English wasn't just about language, it was about confidence, fear, and the absence of encouragement at home. She saw now why he walked with slouched shoulders, why he avoided eye contact, why he hesitated before every answer. Daniel wasn't just learning English, he was learning to believe in himself for the first time. In the following days, she paid closer attention. She noticed how Daniel wore the same two shirts, both faded at the color. His lunchbox was often empty, and sometimes he pretended not to be hungry. When classmates teased him about his clothes or quiet nature, he absorbed the cruelty without protest, shrinking smaller into himself. Miss Anderson made it her mission to counteract those moments with kindness. During one class exercise, when students were asked to write about home, Daniel froze, his pencil hovering above the page. Miss Anderson approached him quietly. It doesn't have to be about your house, she whispered. It can be about a place where you feel safe. Slowly, Daniel wrote, the library, the classroom, the park. It wasn't perfect English, but the meaning was powerful. Miss Anderson tucked the paper away in her drawer that evening, her eyes misty. She began to see her role differently. She wasn't only an English teacher, she was perhaps the only adult who truly listened to Daniel, who saw beyond the broken grammar and hesitant words. His struggles weren't just with tenses and vocabulary, they were with belonging, with self-worth, with carrying burdens no child should bear. That night, Miss Anderson sat at her desk long after the hallways had emptied. She thought about Daniel's quiet confession, about the way his voice trembled when he spoke of home. She realized then that her lessons had to go beyond textbooks. For Daniel, English wasn't just a subject, it was a lifeline, a way to give him the confidence and hope he was missing at home. And she promised herself she wouldn't let him down. The bond between Miss Anderson and Daniel deepened gradually, like sunlight slowly breaking through a cloudy sky. What began as small exchanges after class turned into longer conversations. At first, Daniel spoke in broken English, choosing each word carefully, but soon he discovered that with her, mistakes didn't matter. She didn't laugh at his stumbles, she waited patiently, guiding him when he faltered. That patience gave him courage, and courage opened the door to trust. One afternoon, Miss Anderson assigned the class a project titled My Story. Each student had to share something personal using the English skills they had learned. Most students picked simple topics, favorite hobbies, dreams of travel, or a funny family moment. But when Daniel stood before the class, his hands shook so much that his paper rattled. He glanced at Miss Anderson, who gave him a nod of reassurance. Taking a deep breath, Daniel read, haltingly, "I am Daniel. I am not good in English. I was afraid. But now, I want to try. Because someone believe in me." The room went silent. His classmates, usually restless, listened intently. By the time he finished, Miss Anderson's eyes shimmered with pride. After class, she pulled him aside. "That was brave, Daniel. You shared more than words, you shared your heart." He gave her a shy smile, and for the first time, she saw his shoulders straighten, as if the burden he carried had lightened. That small moment cracked the emotional wall he had built around himself. But the walls didn't come down all at once. Some days, Daniel was cheerful and engaged. Other days, he retreated into silence, as though shadows from home had followed him into the classroom. On one such day, Miss Anderson found him sitting alone in the library, staring at a book but not turning the pages. She sat beside him quietly. "Want to talk?" she asked softly. At first, he shook his head. Then, almost in a whisper, he admitted sometimes, "I feel invisible." Those words struck her like a blow. She told him gently, "You are not invisible, Daniel. Not here. I see you. Your classmates see you. And one day, the whole world will hear your voice." He didn't reply, but she noticed a tear slip down his cheek before he quickly brushed it away. That single tear told her he was beginning to let her in. Over time, Daniel shared more, his fears of failure, his loneliness at home, his wish to be someone his parents could be proud of. Miss Anderson listened without judgment, always reminding him that his worth was not tied to perfect English or flawless grades. "You are more than your mistakes," she often told him. Those words became a lifeline, stitched into his memory. Slowly, Daniel's laughter returned. It was rare, but when it came, it lit up the room. Each laugh, each brave attempt at speaking, each piece of honesty he revealed was another brick removed from the walls he had built. And Miss Anderson knew that this, breaking down those walls, was the real lesson she was teaching. Spring brought new challenges with it. The air outside carried the scent of blooming flowers, but inside the school, tension grew as final exams approached. For most students, the pressure was routine. For Daniel, it was a storm he wasn't sure he could survive. He had come far, his English had improved, and his confidence had grown, but self-doubt still clung to him like a shadow. The day of the English exam arrived, and Daniel sat frozen at his desk, staring at the paper. The words seemed to blur together, sentences collapsing into confusion. His mind screamed, "You can't do this. You'll fail." He clenched his pencil, but his hand trembled so badly he could hardly write. When time was called, his test sheet was barely half-filled. The following week, results were posted on the classroom bulletin board. Students crowded around, buzzing with excitement. Daniel hung back, dreading what he might see. When he finally looked, his heart sank. His score was lower than he had hoped. A whisper of laughter reached his ears from the back of the room. "Figures," one boy muttered. Shame burned Daniel's face as he grabbed his backpack and rushed out. That afternoon, Miss Anderson found him sitting alone on the steps outside the school. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes red. She sat beside him in silence until he finally said, "I tried, but I failed. Maybe I will never be good." His voice cracked on the last word. Miss Anderson placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Daniel, failing a test does not mean you are a failure. One score does not define you." He shook his head. "But everyone laughs. They think I am stupid." Her voice grew firm, though kind. "Let me tell you something. The bravest people are the ones who keep trying even when others laugh. You have already proven that bravery." But the test of trust came a few days later. Rumors spread that Daniel had cheated, an accusation whispered by jealous classmates who couldn't stand seeing his progress. The principal called him in for questioning. Daniel sat in the office, trembling, unable to defend himself in fluent English. The doubt in the principal's eyes crushed him. Miss Anderson intervened. She marched into the office, holding a folder of Daniel's past work. "This boy did not cheat," she said firmly. "I have watched his growth every single day. His mistakes, his progress, his unique way of writing, they cannot be copied. They are his." Her unwavering defense stunned both Daniel and the principal. After reviewing the evidence, the accusation was dismissed. Walking out of the office, Daniel looked up at her with wide eyes. "You believe me?" he asked softly. Miss Anderson smiled. "Always." That was the moment Daniel's trust in her became unshakable. She had stood for him when no one else did. And for the first time in his young life, Daniel realized he wasn't alone. Someone believed in him, not just as a student, but as a person worth fighting for. After the storm of accusations passed, something inside Daniel shifted. He had always been timid, always hesitant to step forward, but Miss Anderson's defense lit a spark in him. It was as if her faith had planted a seed of courage, and slowly it began to grow. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's presence in the classroom changed. No longer did he hide in the back row. Instead, he began raising his hand, sometimes with trembling fingers, but still raising it. His answers weren't always perfect, but each attempt carried determination. His classmates, once quick to mock him, now listened with respect. The boy who used to shrink under their laughter was becoming someone they admired. Miss Anderson noticed it too. One day, she asked students to form groups and prepare a short presentation. In the past, Daniel would have stayed silent, letting others take the lead. But this time, he spoke up. He offered ideas, even guiding his group when they stumbled. His voice was still quiet, but steady. When the group presented, Daniel delivered his part with confidence, and though his grammar wasn't flawless, his passion shone through. The class applauded, and for the first time, Daniel smiled without hiding it. Outside the classroom, the transformation was even more visible. Daniel began spending time in the library, not just hiding, but actively reading, practicing, and exploring. He checked out English novels meant for young readers, sometimes struggling over sentences, but refusing to give up. He also started helping classmates who struggled, sharing tips Miss Anderson had taught him. The boy who once felt invisible was slowly becoming a source of inspiration. One afternoon, Miss Anderson assigned an essay titled, "What I Have Learned." Daniel poured his heart into the task. When she read his essay, tears filled her eyes. His words, though imperfect, carried weight. "I learn English, but also I learn courage. I learn to speak. I learn that mistakes are okay. I learn I am not invisible. I learn someone believed in me, and now I believe too." When she returned the essays, she paused at his desk. "This," she said softly, "is beautiful." Daniel looked down, embarrassed, but glowing with pride. For the first time, he wasn't just passing English, he was mastering himself. The change didn't go unnoticed at home either. His parents, who once overlooked his struggles, began to see the difference. His father remarked one evening, "You speak better now." It wasn't much, but for Daniel, it felt like a door cracking open. His mother smiled more often when he shared about school. The silence at home hadn't disappeared, but Daniel no longer let it define him. By the end of the term, Daniel stood taller, laughed louder, and spoke clearer. Miss Anderson watched him with quiet pride, knowing this transformation wasn't about perfect grammar or high grades. It was about a boy who had found his voice. And as he grew, so did her conviction. Teaching was never just about textbooks. It was about changing lives. The final days of the school year always carried a bittersweet weight. The classroom walls, once echoing with the nervous murmurs of students, now hummed with excitement about summer break and new beginnings. Posters were taken down, desks rearranged, and the air buzzed with anticipation. For Miss Anderson, though, one thought lingered heavily in her heart. Soon, she would have to say goodbye to Daniel. Over the past months, she had watched him grow from a boy afraid to speak into a young man who carried himself with confidence. The transformation was nothing short of extraordinary. But as graduation approached, she realized her role in his life was reaching its natural end. He would move forward, carrying the lessons she had taught, but she would no longer be there daily to guide him. On the last day of school, the class was filled with laughter, hugs, and the exchange of yearbooks. Students rushed to each other with pens, scribbling messages and doodles across the pages. Daniel, who once sat alone and unnoticed, now found himself surrounded by classmates eager to sign his book. Miss Anderson stood quietly by her desk, her heart swelling with pride. When the bell rang for the final time, most students hurried out, eager to start their summer. But Daniel stayed behind, lingering the way he had on that very first day. Slowly, he approached her desk, clutching his yearbook. His voice was steady, but his eyes glistened. "Miss Anderson," he began, "I want to say thank you. Not only for English, but for everything." She smiled warmly, though she felt her throat tighten. "Daniel, you did the work. You found your own voice." He shook his head. "No. Before you, I was invisible. You saw me. You made me believe I can be more." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of every wall she had helped him tear down. Fighting back tears, Miss Anderson signed his yearbook with a message she hoped he would carry for the rest of his life. "Never forget, you are more than enough. Keep speaking, keep believing. The world needs your voice." As Daniel read the note, his smile trembled, and he quickly closed the book to keep from crying. "I won't forget," he whispered. Then, after a brief hesitation, he added, "You're not just my teacher. You're my hero." Those words pierced her heart in the most beautiful way. She wanted to hug him, to tell him how proud she was, but she simply placed a hand gently on his shoulder and said, "Go out there and make me proud. Live the life you deserve." With that, Daniel picked up his backpack and walked toward the door. For a brief moment, he turned back, giving her one last smile before disappearing down the hallway. The classroom fell silent, and Miss Anderson sat alone at her desk. She knew she had taught many students, but Daniel had taught her something too, that the greatest lessons were not found in textbooks, but in the human heart. Years passed, but Miss Anderson never forgot Daniel. Teachers meet hundreds of students over their careers, yet certain ones carve themselves into memory, and Daniel was one of those. Whenever she thought about why she had chosen teaching, his face came to mind. He was proof that the right words, offered at the right time, could change the course of someone's life. One crisp autumn morning, as Miss Anderson sipped coffee at her desk before class, she noticed an envelope tucked among her mail. It was handwritten, the letters uneven but familiar. Her heart skipped as she read the name, Daniel Reyes. With trembling fingers, she opened the letter. "Dear Miss Anderson, it has been many years since your class, but I never forgot you. I want you to know what you did for me changed everything. You taught me English, yes, but more than that, you taught me to believe in myself. Because of you, I finished high school, then college. Today, I am working as a youth counselor, helping kids who feel the way I once did, lost, invisible, without hope. I tell them what you told me, mistakes are not failures, and they are not invisible. They matter. Just like you told me I mattered. Thank you for giving me a voice. I will never forget you. With gratitude, Daniel." Tears blurred Miss Anderson's vision as she folded the letter carefully. A rush of warmth filled her chest, pride, joy, and deep gratitude. She whispered softly to herself, "He found his voice." Later that day, she shared the story with her colleagues, who listened in awe. Many of them spoke of grades, scores, and curriculum, but Miss Anderson knew those things were only part of the journey. What mattered most were the unseen battles students fought, the walls they built, and the teachers willing to help them break free. In the years that followed, Miss Anderson kept Daniel's letter in her desk drawer. Whenever she felt tired, overwhelmed, or doubted her purpose, she pulled it out and reread his words. It reminded her why she showed up every morning, why she smiled at each shy face, and why she chose patience over judgment. Daniel's story became part of her teaching legacy. She would tell her new students, English is not just about words. It's about finding your voice, your courage, your place in the world. And somewhere out there, Daniel was living proof of that truth. The story of a boy once invisible had turned into the story of a man who made others feel seen. And the story of a teacher who once promised to help him find his voice had blossomed into a lifelong impact neither of them could have imagined. Because in the end, true teaching is not just about the lessons written in books, it's about the lessons written in hearts. 11.